Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're taking a truly fascinating journey, zooming all the way out from the vast, kind of abstract realm of philosophical theory straight down to the super urgent, tangible actions we need to take to protect our planet. You know, we hear the word ethics thrown around a lot, especially when we're talking about climate change, corporate responsibility, or conservation. But what does it actually mean to be ethical towards a forest, or a river, or even future generations? How do we possibly balance human progress with planetary survival? Well, we are going to unpack exactly that today.
Okay, let's dive right into this. Here's our roadmap for today. We'll map out the branches of ethics, define environmental ethics, look at planetary justice, examine some real-world ethical disasters, explore 3 ecological philosophies, and finally, weigh the economy against the environment.
Section 1. The Map of Ethics. So, to truly understand our relationship with nature, we first need a macro view of morality. It's a structured discipline, not just a set of feelings. We've got 4 primary branches that categorize the fundamental questions of right and wrong. First, there's metaethics, which asks the big, abstract questions, like what does it even mean for something to be right or wrong? You know, the kind of questions that keep philosophers up at 3 a.m. Then there's prescriptive or normative ethics, which tries to figure out the actual rules, like is it wrong to kill? Descriptive ethics, on the other hand, just looks at what society actually believes is good or bad. And finally, sitting at the bottom, we have applied ethics, which is where things get highly practical.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is just the sheer scale and complexity of this ethical tree. From cognitivism all the way to utilitarianism, you realize humanity has spent centuries building these intricate frameworks to govern behavior. It's massive. But don't worry, we aren't going to get lost in the theoretical branches on the left today. We are focusing our lens specifically on the far right, applied ethics.
To synthesize all this dense taxonomy, let's quickly walk through these dimensions of ethics. Metaethics deals with the nature of thought itself, and normative ethics develops the moral standards. But sitting right there in the middle is applied ethics. This is the application of moral standards to specific, real-world issues. It is literally where the rubber meets the road. It encompasses things like bioethics, business ethics, and of course, our specific destination for today, environmental ethics.
Section 2, Defining Environmental Ethics. Let's move to the next step and see how this builds as we zoom straight down the applied ethics branch.
Before we get bogged down in strict definitions, just consider this thought from Rabindranath Tagore for a second. He said, "The highest education is that which does not merely give us information, but makes our life in harmony with all existence." I love that. It elegantly captures a much more reflective, philosophical tone, reminding us that knowledge without harmony is, well, it's ultimately incomplete.
Strictly defined, environmental ethics is the discipline studying the moral relationship, value, and moral status of human beings to the environment and all its non-human contents. Think about it. A forest isn't just a bunch of timber waiting to be harvested. When we talk about guiding principles, we often forget that plants and animals have a fundamental right to coexist with us. They are completely inseparable from nature. Destroying nature isn't just some engineering problem to solve. It's a fundamental ethical violation that unjustly denies other life forms their basic right to exist.
Section 3, Principles of Planetary Justice.
All right, now that we understand the moral relationship, what are the actual rules of the game? How must we interact with the planet? The first major rule is the principle of sustainability and intergenerational equity. Basically, this is our moral obligation to hand over planet Earth to future generations in the exact same condition we received it. So the crucial point is this: we simply cannot force coming generations to deal with massive crises they didn't even contribute to. Doing so actively prevents them from achieving a good quality of life. It's a massive breach of trust across time.
The second rule is the principle of polluter pays. Let's be real. Environmental degradation and climate change do not hit everyone equally. They disproportionately affect the poor and the vulnerable. We're talking about innocent people who often contributed the absolute least to greenhouse gas emissions. Violating this principle means the burden of those costs falls squarely on the blameless, which creates a profound systemic injustice. The folks causing the damage absolutely must be the ones to bear the costs.
Section 4, Real-World Ethical Disasters.
Now, we need to shift gears a bit, because these concepts matter profoundly outside the classroom. And this brilliantly illustrates what happens when these ethical rules just completely fail in the real world. Look at the Exxon Valdez spill, an absolute failure of corporate responsibility that dumped 11 million gallons of crude oil into a pristine ecosystem.
Or the Bhopal tragedy in India, where grossly negligent safety standards led to a toxic gas leak that killed thousands of people practically overnight. Or just consider the ongoing deforestation of the Amazon right now, where clearing land for logging and mining is accelerating biodiversity loss and directly harming indigenous tribes. These are not just accidents, guys. They are ethical disasters that happen when economic interests override our obligations to humans and ecosystems.
Section 5. 3 ecological philosophies. To prevent those kinds of ethical disasters, we really need a framework. As we go through these next 3 distinct philosophies, I want you to ask yourself where your own morals align. First up is deep ecology, championed by philosopher Arne Naess. This framework completely rejects anthropocentrism, which is basically the arrogant belief that nature exists solely for human use. Instead, deep ecology views the entire ecosphere as a seamless web of interdependencies where humans and nature are absolute equals. Adopting this view isn't just about, remembering to recycle more. It requires radical social and political change to truly promote biodiversity.
Next, we have the land ethic. This was formulated by Aldo Leopold way back in his 1949 book, A Sand County Almanac. Leopold argued that we absolutely have to enlarge the boundaries of our community to include soils, waters, plants, and animals. Collectively, he called this the land. Under this philosophy, humans are just plain members and citizens of this biotic community. We are not conquerors of it. Every single ethical choice we make has to respect the integrity, stability, and beauty of the whole community. Finally, there's the animal rights philosophy, notably advanced by Peter Singer. This view argues that sentient animals deserve equal consideration of their interests simply because they have the capacity to suffer. Singer famously posed this rhetorical challenge that kind of shifted the entire debate. He asked, the question is not, can they reason, nor can they talk, but can they suffer? If a creature can suffer, it inherently has a right to humane treatment.
Section 6. Economy versus the environment. All right, now we arrive at the ultimate crucible, where all these applied ethics theories are truly tested, the massive clash between economic development and environmental degradation. Here we have 2 totally competing viewpoints. On the left side, we have utilitarianism. From this perspective, the goal is to choose the distribution of goods that maximizes the total amount of well-being for the greatest number of people. So, for example, building a huge hydroelectric dam might displace a local population and cause real misery for the worst off. But if it provides a marginal gain in electricity and wealth for a much larger population, a strict utilitarian would say that policy is entirely justified. But then, look at the right side. Here we have alternative accounts of justice. These frameworks argue that maximizing total welfare just isn't enough if it crushes the minority. Justice demands that we give priority to the worst off, ensuring a minimal level of welfare for everyone. It forces us to stop and ask if a policy is truly fair, not just if it's efficient.
Which brings us to our final thought for this explainer. We know from the source material that the negative effects of climate change are going to fall disproportionately on the poor right now and on future generations, the very people who are least responsible for the emissions in the first place. So here is the big question. If climate change hurts the most vulnerable, does maximizing overall global economic welfare actually justify sacrificing them? It's a profound conflict between utility and justice, and honestly, it is the defining ethical dilemma of our time. Take a moment to think about what side of that equation you stand on. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into environmental ethics, and I'll see you in the next explainer.